but I'm in favor of Canada's law. I don't think that it's the place of any psychiatrist if a person, let's say a boy, goes up to them and says like, hey, I think I might be a girl, for the doctor to go like, no, actually, I think you're not. I think you're a boy. I think that research on that has proven that to be a very ineffective way of dealing with any underlying issues. The best thing that you can do is affirm and try to get underneath it at like any other concerns that might be present. And you try to understand the degree to which it's a sincere belief as opposed to a sort of errant or flippant or otherwise unjustified self-perception.
And the other thing is affirmation sounds like a nice thing, but it's the worst thing you can do. It's colluding with a false belief. And these people need reality. They don't need collusion. Because later on, when they regret, when they detransition, they'll just say, why didn't you challenge what I was saying?
From the data we have, detransition isn't common. And when it happens, it's usually because of social stigma or medical barriers.
All my regretters said, when they regretted it, they went back to their employers, their family, their friends, and they said, why didn't you just say, what on earth are you thinking about when I came out? And they all said, because we're being supportive, because that's what I meant to do. And they said, well, I wish they hadn't been supportive.
It's worth noting that from the studies I've seen, the majority of people who are detransitioning are doing so not because they're not the identity they transitioned into.
So obviously, they're not the wrong sex.
But because of social or medical barriers preventing them.
They said, we wish we'd had a group like this because the group was challenging. It wasn't confrontational, it was challenging. So when someone said, oh, I feel like a woman, the group said, what does that feel like? That's not a feeling state. Like, feelings are happy, sad, irritated, angry. There's a feeling of being a woman.
Is there like a statistical concern of people doing it flippantly to avoid the internalized feelings of shame they have over their homosexuality? From what I've seen, that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems, at the very least, counterintuitive to me. I mean, you would acknowledge that being trans is a lot harder than being gay, wouldn't you?
In the transsexual subgroup, there was almost 100% autism and or trauma and or internalized homophobia. 11
or 12 studies show that children with gender dysphoria, as they get older and reach puberty, they're more likely to outgrow those feelings than
gender
why would
dysphoria
they
isn't the same as identifying as the other
puberty.
gender.
The gender is like religion. It's a man-made organization of thinking and beliefs. It's not real. Gender is not real.
Though gender dysphoria isn't the same as identifying as the other gender, though. But what we're talking about when we say gender dysphoria, I believe the study was just looking for like incongruence, like a feeling of discomfort. Dysphoria being a more pointed medical term.
If gender's doing a head in, then don't worry about it. Don't believe in it. It doesn't exist. Biological sex exists. Gender is like a religion. Just be a gender atheist. If it's bothering you that much.
If you say trans women are men, but that doesn't mean you should be mean to them, you've already done the mean thing. You can't. The discrimination is based on on your unwillingness to recognize their gender identity.
The transsexual person dressed up has no idea whether they're passing or not, whether you're reading them or not. So if I can get you to call me she and use she, her pronouns, and you say that, therefore you think that. So even though they can't police your thought, they can police your speech. And that's a roundabout way of policing your thought because he's using she, her pronouns. So therefore he is seeing me and believing that I'm she, her. If you slip up, then you don't believe it. So it's a very teleological, very black and white way of a proxy understanding of what's happening in your mind. Because they don't get bothered about other bits of grammar, but that for them means you really believe that they are the gender that they want you to call them.
But I mean, it's not as though you just go over to the clinic as a 12-year-old and they just pop you a bottle of hormones, right? You go through rigorous pediatric psychiatric analysis, and then maybe you get on hormone blockers. And then of the people who get on hormone blockers, the overwhelming majority decide to go on and take actual hormones to transition later on, which is in large part, I think, because the pediatric psychiatrists do a pretty good job. If you're in there getting appointments for like a year and you're talking to an expert and you're like that grounded, even as a kid, on your identity just not matching your birth sex, That to me seems like it's indicative, if nothing else, at least maybe of the validity of puberty blockers.
What I found is that less than 2% of my patients went on for any physical, hormonal, or surgical things. Less than 2%. Because once they'd realised that this solution they had wasn't really a solution, but it was a proxy solution for something else underlying which they were escaping from, and once they dealt with that, then everything was okay.
If you're getting these kids like appointments for years and a professional is able to, bring together like a strong argument, like, yeah, I think this is actually like, and then you get on the puberty blockers and they're reversible and you have some more time to feel however you want about yourself. And right now, the evidence that we have is the majority of people, overwhelming majority, who get on puberty blockers transition, and the overwhelming majority of people who transition are happy about it and don't regret it.
The problem is when people say that they are the wrong sex, absolutely nobody says, how do you know? How do you get there? And my therapy was just basically trying to get them to show you that they're working through as to how they got there. Because in the hundreds of patients I saw over the years, not a single patient was able to accurately convince me or anyone else as to what it was to be a man or woman. They would only ever describe external characteristics, like I like long hair, I like the dresses, I like cooking, I'm emotional, I like playing with boys. It was always nonsense. So I actually think there's no such thing as trans. I think it's a proxy solution for something else. And I think the medical profession has invented something
Oftentimes there's this weird conflation where it's like the researchers are beholden to the activists, but then somehow the activists are in agreement with almost every major medical institution in the United States. So it's actually the researchers who are the activists, in which case you'd think they wouldn't be beholden to anyone because they're acting ideologically in line with the group you'd expect.
I don't want to cut you off. Is it possible that these organizations have also been influenced by the activists?
Influenced? Sure. But to the extent that it's compromised the validity of their research? No, I think that's conspiratorial.
Whilst I was there, I also spent a couple of days a week in the TAVI GID service. And my role there was mainly to be a heckler and a troublemaker, because what I saw was camp boys and tomboys coming in and being trans. And I said to the director at the time, isn't what you're doing mad? Because these kids these are 4 or 5 year olds. Aren't they just going to end up being gay boys and lesbians, or just neither? And his response was, would it be any more mad than them being gay? And this came from the Tavistock, where homosexuality was considered an inversion, it was pathological. I went through 2 terms of teaching when I trained there on the pathology of homosexuality. Anyway, that's the background to the clinic.
It's a long-standing conspiracy among homophobes that the only reason the APA removed homosexuality from the DSM was because of activist pressure, and that in reality they all knew being gay is a mental illness, and they only took it off because of political pressure. In the absence of evidence, I can't say so. I think that the research on trans people, the sort of prevailing attitude, is consistent across disciplines for a reason, and it's because most of this stuff is borderline common sense. I don't think the activists hold much sway in what can or can't be researched.
But I treated adults. So with adults, I thought, well, they can do what they want. They're adults. All I want to do is help you think. I don't want to convince you to do something or not to do something. You can do what you want. I just want you to think. You can do whatever you want. Just think about it first. And so if I was there trying to convince them not to do something, it wouldn't be helpful. It had to be neutral. That's why I can't imagine working with kids, because I would know in my head that I really would want to do that. But with adults, I thought, well, as long as you spend time thinking about it, then decide, then... But they invariably didn't. Thanks.